As I know, we don't have a single recording of a full service at Westminster Chapel, and that is a real loss because the service led to the sermon, and they were united, and he led the whole service, and you didn't notice him doing it. I believe it's the work of the Holy Spirit. As with Spurgeon, people didn't say when Spurgeon was preaching, why doesn't he let other people do things? When the Holy Spirit is speaking, the man himself is in the background. But that is a real loss that we don't have. Do we have any recorded service of a typical Sunday at Westminster?
So tell us what a typical Sunday service would be like.
Well, he would come quietly into the pulpit, bow his head for a moment at the desk, then the doxology would be sung without intimation, and then he would lead in a brief prayer, and then the first hymn which he would announce, and it would be a hymn leading into worship, and perhaps especially for the Lord's Day. And then the morning service would always include one metrical psalm, but then before sermons there would be what we call the long prayer, pastoral prayer, and then brief notices by the church secretary, who had been at Princeton in 1906, and in the 1950s he was still attired as though it was Princeton in 1906. And then a hymn before the sermon, and then the sermon. But by the time the sermon came, generally you were gripped. There's no question of the preacher having to get the attention of the people and tell them a little story to interest them. So we're losing the service. We've really lost something. But he would have probably said, you can't put that on tape.
He didn't like to have his sermons recorded.
He wouldn't have cared to have all the prayers and things. He wouldn't have cared for that. No.
Maybe that's why we don't have any tapes of that.
No, I think it's because, the taping really began before he had, it was kind of a little surreptitiously done.
Did he not know he was being taped?
Well, there were two elderly ladies in Shropshire, and the plea was they would like to hear, they can't get out to church and they would like to hear these, and he knew about that, but there was rather more going on than he knew at first.
The church hasn't really changed that much.
And that is something I learned with him. If you wanted to do something which you thought he wouldn't approve, you just had to do it and then afterwards take whatever came. But
oh, thank you for teaching staff that, Ian. So, John, as a man with a lot of experience preaching, what do you make of Lloyd-Jones as a preacher? When you listen to him preach, are you thinking, that's something I could never do? Are you thinking, that's what I do every Sunday, that's what every preacher does every Sunday? Are you thinking, oh, I wish he didn't do that? I mean, what do you think of him when you listen to him preach?
I don't think I dissect the event. I don't think I take apart what he's doing. He's always been so compelling to me. Just one little illustration of that is he believed in law work in evangelism.
Absolutely, yes.
That you had to preach the law, confront sin. And he not only believed you needed to tell the sinner he was a sinner, but you needed to prove it to him.
Yeah.
And so there was all of this argument that was going on, this logical argument. He was pinning the sinner down. And that's what you get with Lloyd-Jones when you listen to him preach. You're swept up. And you can't see the skeleton. This thing is fleshed out.
Thank you for saying that, John. That's so important. He meant to disturb people. People complained. This man talks to us as though we're sinners. And when Lloyd-Jones heard that, he was encouraged. It's true. And sometimes people left Westminster Chapel vowing they'd never come here again. But they did. They did come again. So he did speak very plainly to people. And again, it was the sense that it wasn't simply Lloyd-Jones speaking to them. There was something more happening and conviction.
And that's true even with the things he said to Christians. I listened to the series on Romans 11, the benediction. It's just you're so overwhelmed with the flow of thought and the grasp that he has, and the intensity and the energy and the strength of this argument and this unpacking, that you really are. The Lord is speaking through this instrument.
Yeah, that's right.
He talked about preaching as a kind of diagnostic affair, sort of with his medical background, where he would try to understand the nature of the problem, ask questions, press. Sounds also a little bit like a lawyer arguing, trying to do more than I think we often do with our sermons today.